Fantastic. Well, we are now definitely live on Facebook. So
Woo-hoo!
welcome everybody. Welcome Marcus, all the way from Norway. You're in Norway today?
I'm in Norway. Yep. South Coast Norway. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So wonderful to have you here. And Mark and Linda, good to see you enjoying your Frenchness.
And I'm legal now. I'm a legal alien.
Yeah. You're just not an Englishman in New York, huh? Okay.
I'm happy to swap places with you, by the way, because I mean, 11 degrees Celsius up here. You probably are in the high 20s.
24, so mid 20s. We are expecting 11 on Saturday, though. Jono, are you going to get that cold?
No. We're getting down into the low teens, 10s overnight. So it's probably about 13 or 14 degrees outside right now. But I'm heading to Pawleys Island straight after this call. down on the South Carolina coast, and it's going to be 25 to 28 degrees down there every day. So happy days.
Not jealous.
Three days at the beach.
So Marcus, you're in Stavanger, so you're on the coast, aren't you?
I am.
There's winter storms and things kicking in.
It is the this is kind of the Perth of Norway. It's sort of I wouldn't say isolated, but definitely like it's far from Oslo. There's beaches. This is the only place where you can kite surf and surf. And then it's the oil and gas sort of capital of the country, I would say. So in that sense, it's like Perth.
It drives a lot of the innovation, and hence you're there and headquarters all your innovation activities in one of the top places of the world.
Yeah, I think that's actually less known because usually people associate oil and gas with it's a stifling industry. I mean, it's really not innovating. But I mean, if you just cast your mind back like 20 or 30 years, I mean, what they did here in the 60s when they brought drilling rigs and actually starting exploring offshore production. I mean, it's pretty incredible what they actually managed to do to get the equipment out that far into rough seas. We're talking several kilometer, deep wells, and the equipment and the safety, and then there was tons of accidents. Multiple of these big structures actually went down, and thousands of people lost their lives. So there's lots of innovation happening, but it's been stifling after they conquered some of those challenges. Innovation went down, and so now we're sort of amidst a new era, right? So it's oil and gas is in decline, and it's renewable. So there's new challenges now. So yeah, it feels good to be on that side of that trench. So yeah.
So you were not the first person from Stavanger that I had met, and not the first I'd met on the Sunshine Coast. But we didn't meet in Norway. We met on the Sunshine Coast, didn't we? 6 or so years ago now.
Yeah. Beautiful sunny coast.
Yeah. And what the hell was this Norwegian doing in Australia?
Well, I was actually working in this, obviously because this is the oil and gas capital, you end up working for oil and gas companies. I was working for one, and we had a new oil and gas crisis. They were laying people off. I thought, this is the time to do my MBA, because I really want to do a secondary master's, because I have a master's in IT. And I wanted to. It was between the U.S. or Australia, and then I zoomed in on Australia, zoomed in on the Sunshine Coast, and up and down the coast there. I mean, it didn't really take long before I made up my mind, and I was shuffling between surf sessions, kite sessions, this beautiful area, and almost living on the beach. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. Nobody really knows how beautiful that area is. I mean, go north in Queensland, it's just absolutely incredible. So yeah, I was doing my MBA, and one day there's a person who is talking about this. They want to do an event or a hackathon, and then I pitched we should do a startup weekend, because I did one before, and it's incredible. Like, I met all these amazing people, and then I came into the discussions with some of the people who runs the entrepreneurship program. Rita Skippers was one of them, and then Mark became one of the mentors, and then that's how we met. So yeah, that was a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
In fact, this interview series that we've been doing for over 5 years now, we started it on the Sunshine Coast. We were on the northern end. We went and did a pilot test in a cafe in Yamundi.
I was going to say, no, technically we started in America. That makes it sound way more salubrious, but no, you're right. We did the pilot in the cafe with Dakar.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I traveled through Yamundi, but I can't really remember where. So that's an hour and a half outside of Sunny Coast, right?
Yeah, so it's about 45 minutes north of the Innovation Centre at the university where you were.
Right. Okay, then I know where it is.
Yamundi
markets. There's a market. There's a famous market.
Oh my God!
Now you've got it. And the name of our business and Bare Feet, was because we were mentoring while walking along those beautiful Sunshine Coast and Noosa beaches.
Now, Mark, you're making him feel worse about being in Norway, right?
Yeah. And this thing, I can't even travel back because Australia is probably the worst country when it comes to like border control. And,
yes, I know New Zealand, but yeah.
Yeah, they're doing it tough, and they're probably not going to change anytime soon. They're barely opening the state borders, let alone international borders. So I think they're talking about some 30,000 Australians still can't get back into the country.
Yeah, it's a lot. They're now starting to talk about how to repatriate. But anyway, Marcus, tell us a bit of your story. How have you got to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Well, first of all, I didn't really see myself as an entrepreneur, and this is actually quite common, I think, with people who start businesses. I mean, it's really, a lot of people think it's not for me. I mean, it's, this is too difficult it's too risky, right? And I think, I was probably one of those people too. But after joining a startup weekend and doing a lot of these events and meeting other people who's in the same boat, really just got me more and more curious. So I ended up, after the year in Australia, a year and a half, I came back and I was just really, really keen to do my own thing, really start my own business. So a couple of friends, former colleagues and acquaintances, we formed so my first company was a consultancy company, which actually has been quite successful. So that's sort of been my main gig over the last couple of probably 5 years, and then I've
specialized with that.
So we started out as a very small innovation and design agency, so really boutique sort of consultancy services within the space of innovation. And so it's all about really understanding innovation processes, creating space for innovation to happen, helping clients sort of understand that process and helping them, find new products and services, and also collaborations with startups in general, like in startup programs. And we ended up merging the company because we found this other company in Denmark who was doing a lot of the same things we were, and culturally we just really, really matched together. And that company is called Innovation Lab. We were called Buna at the moment, and then we merged those two, and I became the sort of managing director of operations in Norway. And then my colleague at the time, she moved to Dubai because her husband was there, and then she and I actually then decided to set up an office, a presence in Dubai as well. So I ended up shuffling back and forth between Norway and Dubai, and we did the same in San Francisco. So sort of expanding the brand globally now for the last 5 years. So that's been exciting. But at the same time, I've launched a couple of other startups. I did a game studio releasing a game. We did a double-sided marketplace sort of tech company. I was headhunted 2 years ago. I was headhunted to a VC company. So I did a VC operation for 2 years. But I'm back now, the innovation consultancy gig, and yeah, it's really exciting. You have to stop me here because I can just go on and on.
No, that's the whole point.
That's the whole point, because part of what we've been doing over the years is that we interview entrepreneurs in their journey, not after they've made it. You know, they're a typical, speaker on stage that talks about the success they've had, made millions or whatever. But we concentrate on people that are going through the process. And this year, being one of the most interesting years around, has created a lot of change, a lot of thought, and all sorts of recalibration. And so people that are in it are going through all of this right now. So tell us, what's changed this year with you? What has the COVID pandemic done to your business opportunities and your startups and your groups that you're involved in?
Yeah, it's pretty much slashed all my projects. So not really good, to be honest. But then again, this is where new opportunities come from, right? So actually, we started this company amidst a depression in Norway at the time. This was back in 2014. It's, our economy is really affected by the oil and gas price. And so every time we have a decline in oil and gas, it's just really, everyone's struggling. And so we actually started the company. So this is familiar terrain, luckily for myself and, the people involved starting it, because this is how we came up. And we made it happen the last time. And I see that there's no change in that in the sense that, I really feel, especially also with the field I'm in, it's when there's tension and conflict and real struggles like it is now that you find willingness to innovate. So for me, it's always been almost like a breath of fresh air once you come out of a really good period, like economic growth and, everything's pointing upwards. Once you get into that stage where people start to, there is this awkward phase, and we've been through that now. I mean, through March, April, people were like really hunkering down, not talking to anyone, not doing anything. Now they're actually, taking some phone calls and opening some doors. But it's really refreshing to get into like a super big, almost like global meltdown like this, because it really forces people to change and be willing to change. And that's really what I'm really out there trying to talk to people. I'm looking for people who's open for change, and lots of people are right now because of the pandemic. So I think for me, it's been.
Can you share some of that conversations without naming people, but can you share the tone and the topics that have come up in the last few months with these business people and innovators that you're very well connected with? Because I guess it probably worth saying is that you're connected very high in organisations and large organisations as well. So you're seeing the pain that the top end of town is going through, as well as the grassroots bootstrapping innovator and startup founder.
Yeah.
Share what some of the conversations or the topics that you've been finding this year that wasn't as big last year.
Perhaps pivoting.
Sorry?
A lot of pivoting.
A lot of people talking about pivoting.
Yeah. That's how you roll now. You have to pivot all the time. I guess that's actually one of the points that I find that people are actually embracing or talking about different ideas that they otherwise wouldn't, and be open to other types of conversations. I think one thing that stood out for me is that once this pandemic just hit, I think there's a lot of leaders who were quite convinced that we need to there needs to be more processes. We need to enforce new rules and regulations. We need to help these employees who's now sitting at home helplessly. Like, we need to help them. We need to add structure. We need to embrace structure in these times of complexity. And I think a lot of them were quite taken off by the fact that this actually pretty much worked out really well. Like I think people anticipated that this would be more difficult, that employees would just sit at home not doing anything. I don't think they anticipated that things would actually work as well, to the point where actually the company is doing better than it was before the pandemic. There's been lots of conversations around that, which I've had, which is interesting, right? Because this is a management issue, but just goes to show, once you actually give employees, if they have the opportunity to do the right thing, they usually will. They won't just sit at home, not do anything. I mean, lots of companies are doing better now than they were before the pandemic. So I think there's also a willingness now to look at the management model, like how are we managing people, how are we governing things, what are we expecting from employees, so that I think that's at least for me, you guys, I'd love to hear from you as well, like what's been the takeaways there, because I think there's more trust now than there was before, at least in some industries, about what will employees do if we just let them sit at home.
Yeah, you use that do the right thing analogy, and I actually have a client that says they want to, Mark, you know this guy, he wants to write a book. He says it's going to be just all blank pages, and on every page is do the right thing. That's all you need. And so long as we know what the right thing is, that's all you need in a book. And but I've got some clients that they, like I sat down with one this week, they've had their best year ever.
Yeah, isn't that remarkable? That's
2020, they've boomed. Yeah, they expected in March, they started to refocus their results, saying, I wonder what's going to happen, and they're actually outpacing last year. So it's definitely happening in pockets. It's now obviously Mark and Linda, for example, are very tied up in the tourism and hospitality business. That is not booming. It's been forced not to. But then again, even then, when you talk about pivot and innovation, you're seeing, I'm seeing a lot more of a shift to these smaller agile companies that have the resources to pivot, that are good at, that can do it. And they're really picking up the slack. So even if you look in the hospitality trade, if you're in a town like where I am, which is very much a spa town or a B&B kind of place, it's just absolutely, like, summer here has been bedlam. It really has been so busy, and they've had record numbers everywhere. And so there's that kind of localization and that kind of feel as well, when you can't go across global borders, right?
Right. Yeah, it's and you even see it in big corporations. I don't know if you saw this, but Qantas had their fastest selling plane sold out, and just
10 hours to nowhere.
10 hours. And it's a flight to nowhere.
Yeah.
You go up, and then it just flies around, and then comes down to the same place.
Yeah.
Hold on, it flies around Australia. It's a 7-hour lap of Australia with like Ayers Rock and Great Barrier Reef. It's not.
They're talking about bringing it down to 4,000 feet over the reef and stuff like that.
It's stunning.
But
incredible.
However, this is the beginning of revenge tourism. Like, this is going to be, that's just the tip of the iceberg, I reckon. Everyone's like, I'm out of here.
but you're right, Marcus. I think this is very common in business. When we get into good times, we almost get into ruts that we don't even realize we're in, right? Because things are okay. We're just sailing along, and say, a rut is a grave with no ends on it. And so we can get into these good ruts where business is good, but there's something coming, and because we're in the rut and we're just plodding along. And I think that's been some of the case here in the American economy, that things have been so good now for a few years. But what I agree with you. What I love is I've just seen this human ingenuity, just people looking for ways to do things, and it's all led by the private sector. It's led by smaller, medium businesses. Even the bigger companies have struggled to adapt quickly. But the small ones, they were ready to open as soon as the phased opening started. But then, we live in I'm wearing a brewery t-shirt now. We live in a brewery town, right? So we've got 72 breweries in the 30 square mile radius here. So good place to come and base yourself, man. And But putting all that aside,
it's an alcohol problem waiting to happen.
yeah, well, that's before you get to the moonshine. And but the interesting thing is that some of the bigger breweries took weeks, and some of them still haven't reopened to the public. They're producing, but they're not open to the public. Whereas all the little ones, they've got bands playing already. They've got stuff going on. They figured out, like, some of them spent a bit of money and like Dry Falls, the guys that I hang out with, they expanded outside. So they put all this undercover seating and seating up front, and so everyone can spread out. Business is good.
Yeah.
And, you know, because they adapted quickly. And so.
Mark, what are you seeing that people are doing in their businesses that have surprised you? Like, you know, for instance, the guys that in breweries, a lot of them were changing and shifting over to making hand sanitizers and, you know, things like that. What are the things that you're seeing in Norway that have surprised you or you thought was really quite interesting?
Well, there is a couple of, yeah. Did you, what was the example you said with the breweries?
They were doing hand sanitizers.
Yeah. I was going to say, because I actually have a friend who actually did this. She has a gin distillery, and they went from they totally shifted. But, you know, obviously now the market is flooded, so they're back to gin because people are sitting at home drinking more. So I mean, it's a perfect opportunity to just double down on you know, good gin.
But it's interesting these markets. So here in France, there is a massive glut of champagne because there are less parties and events, which is the normal place that you have champagne. It's a celebratory drink compared to gin. Which might be certainly there if it's going to get cold. It might be just, you know, the latest warming fluid.
Gin.
Right. Well, I guess I've seen some interesting you know, pivots. For me, it seemed like we went from lots of pivots to actually coming, you know, fairly quickly back to normal. And you see this also on Wall Street. If you've seen the economic development, I mean, it's a V-shaped, they call it a V-shaped recovery. You know, a lot of companies are going back to the way they were operating and selling as they were selling. But like I said, like, for me, the most interesting things has been the management model. Like, I really think this is interesting, and maybe we'll see sort of innovations happening in the way we structure work and the way we structure people, and because that for me seems like also like a space we should innovate in. I mean, if you go back 150 years, the first evidence of the modern organization, Taylorism, and you know, how we structure and a hierarchical sort of organization is there's a CEO on top, and then you have multiple layers of mid-management, which is all actually just wasting a lot of time and actually creating a lot of bureaucracy. And you see, at least I've seen now, like, there's evidence suggesting that, you know, we could actually slash a couple of these layers of bureaucracy and just be more network. And I think the future organization is more an organism than it is an organization. It's more these tightly coupled sort of teams and pods of people instead of this really like a top-down, really military type of organization where you have all these layers. I think that's we
have seen that emerging this year in the hotel industry.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's the industry that Linda and I are working on with our own startup. Jono is very familiar. You know, he started his early life in the hotel industry, and they're very typical pyramid structures. They're very layered, and climbing the ladder is very important in terms of recognition in the hotel industry. It's not a flat structure like you would get with an IT company. We are seeing that middle management layer decimated. Head office is decimated by the world's biggest hotel groups and travel groups. They're leaving the front line alone. They're leaving the hotels alone and so forth. But the as you say, that amalgamation group, the people that are bringing things together and trying to homogenize, that is the group of people that are most at risk. but the innovation is still occurring.
Yeah. I think people tend to forget that, the most powerful innovation or technology humanity has ever been able to create is the modern organization. It allows us to cooperate the way we do, right? But nothing really radical has happened in the last 150 years. I mean, it's pretty much the same way, like going back to like Ford and how they made these, how they made the modern organization today. I mean, nothing radical has happened, but you're seeing these startups or these companies starting now, and also technology that's following up. There was a interesting company I came across a couple of years ago called Colony.io, which is using blockchain to basically enable everyone to start a sort of a digital, tribe online, in which the blockchain, it's sort of a company. So you start this company on this blockchain, but it's not a company. It's a tribe where anyone who participates and adds of their efforts, time, effort, and really adds to the project. So say you were building the next Wikipedia.com, and so so you set up something on this on Colony.io, which is this project, and then there's several developers, there's people who's doing marketing, there's people who's doing writing the articles, stuff like that, and then whoever's just contributing more gets a larger share of the value add of this company. And so whenever you start to slack off and do less, then you're also entitled less. And so the blockchain keeps track of what is owed to whom at what given time, and also the ownership of this. And so I think there's lots of interesting innovations happening
about volunteer-based engagement. People are voluntarily joining a project, which could be a company. They could be volunteering to help on a particular organization, and their reward, in this case, doesn't look like it's cash, like an employment arrangement or a contracting arrangement. In this case, it's a share of the company.
Well, it does almost come back to the original concept of a company was a company of people with a common purpose, right?
Yeah.
You're going after. In fact, it wasn't even necessarily a profitable activity back then. It was, you talk about a company being a military exercise or a company being a community. And so, so we've kind of used it as that profit-making venture. Obviously sustainability is important, but I agree with you, Marcus. I've seen a lot. I work with a few in the sort of the larger corporate space over here in the US, and I've seen them really rethink their whole thing as a company. One that basically decided to sell off a whole division of their business, and they're really focusing on the bit they do extremely well and becoming much more of that family unit again. But the big shift has been coming for a long time. It's been driven by millennials and then down into whatever the next level generations are. And that is, we want to be part of something, not just be in a business, not just a job. And the good companies have identified that. And for startups, that's a hard thing to identify, and how to build that in your people from the early days, because that really, really matters to people.
It's super important. Also, as a startup, to actually attract talent in that phase, because you can't really give them. Usually, as a startup, you can't really give them the best salaries, right? So you need something else that's that's compelling for them to join. But there's also super interesting examples. I read this case just recently about Gore. I mean, Gore-Tex, the company that has the fabrics, in our jackets to keep us dry, right? Gore-Tex, yes, you know what it is. It's a super old company. I mean, it's I don't know how old it is, but it's one of those almost like 100-year-old companies or something. And then they have a super interesting management model where they don't allow buildings of people to be more than 100 people. So because back in the heydays, 100 people was the natural size of a village, and so you would actually know if it's around 100 people, you actually know all the people by first name. And so it's when you go beyond people, you can't really remember the names, and then everything becomes abstract, and then you feel like you're just I'm just an ant in the anthill, like I'm just. And then the sort of thinking there is that you have a larger sense of accountability if you're one of the people in the village. So one is the size. The other one is there's no bosses. So there's self-driven teams, or I think they call them pods, which is like there's up to like 5 or 6 people, and you can't be a bit bigger pod than that. And then the group decides your responsibilities, and the group decides whether or not you're doing a good job, and the group decides what your salary and benefits should be, which I think is like super fascinating. Like imagine if you came into and then people are holding you accountable, not just one individual, one boss whose job it is to make sure you do yours, which in my mind is that's this definition of bureaucracy, right? So
worst form of accountability anyway.
Yeah, it is. So so this new model that they're experimenting with, there's several companies in the US experimenting with other ways of organizations. That's just, and definitely like all these internet companies. I mean, Automatic, the owner of WordPress, which is I think they power 50% of all web pages in the world, is a remote first company. I mean, there's no people in one office. Like they might have a couple of people in the same building, just spread across the city, but there's no HQ. Usually people just stay at home and work, and they've been doing that since probably over the last 10 years. So yeah, it's and they also have these pods, these smaller teams and stuff like that. So
we've had this year, this pandemic year has created a lot more change, not necessarily at the leading space, but it's now moved down into everyday sorts of businesses. They've been forced to work from home. They've been forced to engage remote workers. When people have been let go, they still need to purchase temporary labour from places. Office rentals disappearing. Accountability management is now done not by looking over the shoulder. So it's affected so many more people than before. And so it's a big change. It's a big societal change, even though it's not necessarily a great leap forward for many companies that have been doing it for those 10 years like you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's super interesting.
So, Marcus, with your journey as an entrepreneur, what's been one of your biggest challenges of shifting from going into entrepreneurship? Working for a company and then going into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think the complexity of starting a business is not well understood usually among most people, because there's so many aspects and there's so many things you have to be able to sort of comprehend and skills that you necessarily haven't been training for at university, or stuff that comes up. And I think that's also what makes it really interesting, what makes it really challenging and really just fun to do. And also it makes it quite vulnerable. I mean, you're especially if you're starting your own company and you're sort of setting a goal like, okay, I'm going to try and see if this goes for like 3 years, and I have a 3-year runway of spending my own money. You're quite alone really quickly. You feel like you're isolated, and you are, because people who's back in the 9-to-5 job really don't understand the risk you're taking. They don't really feel that sense of urgency every day. And so, all you want to talk about when you meet someone over dinner, like, I'm struggling now. Like I'm doing this new project, or we're trying to get this technology working. And they don't really want to hear about that, because they have a safe job. They just want to, like, what are you doing Saturday? What are you doing this weekend? I just want to talk about my startup, like my life. And I think that's quite, people don't really understand how people really don't care about you and your entrepreneurial journey sometimes, right? So it's sometimes quite lonely to start your own company. So it's really important for an entrepreneur to find other people who's on the same journey, because it's really about sharing those moments and really, finding other people who's who's also suffering, because I mean, entrepreneurship, sometimes it's about suffering.
At 3 a.m., the 3 a.m. founder syndrome.
Yeah.
I think that's something I took away quite early, and just being also humble for all the things that just comes with entrepreneurship. I mean, it's if it was easy, lots more people would actually do it, because you know the benefits of starting a company. I mean, wow, like what a freedom feeling it is to be your own boss. So actually, I think, you know, most people, if they had the chance, they would just leap into it, at least if there's some kind of safety net. But that's also where, you know, where the risk comes in, and why not so many people do it is because, I mean, it is a high risk poker game. And, you know, you only get better by, you know, failure. And most people also don't really, you know, want to deal with too much failure. I mean, we're prone to go after success and minimize our failure. But, you know, if you're going to be a good entrepreneur, you need to really be comfortable by learning by mistake, and being able to, you know, pick yourself up and all that stuff. So
that's beautiful. And that probably ties back into some of your early comments, where I think entrepreneurs recognize this, and they're always so willing just to be there for somebody else, or to help, or just be part of a community or a conversation.
Yeah.
And I said,
that's a good point, actually. I think that's why I feel these people are sort of my people, because I you know, there's and it's the same thing. I can sort of draw the analogy to surfing and kite surfing, because, you know, most people wouldn't necessarily know this, but actually surfing, which is like this, you know, the image of a surfer is like this cool dude, you know, heading down and looks good and has a board, he's a badass. But actually, inside the surfing community, they're all loners. They're all, because they really don't want to be among other surfers, because you want to have this wave to yourself. Yeah. So they hardly talk to each other when they're out there on the water. You would see like 150 people maybe, you know, there's no one who's talking.
No one talks.
Everyone is just like, don't come near me, like stay away, like this is my wave. And so it's really, that's what hit me the first time. I was like, what? I thought these guys were like the most social, most nice people. They're actually quite...
I grew up amongst the surf community, and they were all like that. And it's funny because I've took up, since I've moved here, I've taken up mountain bike riding.
Right.
And the mountain bike community, although they behave a lot like surfers, you know, they use the same words, and, you know, they do this when they're riding, all that sort of stuff, completely different. It's like they all love riding together. They'll chat on the trail. We always joke, like these meeting points all through the forest here. It's like, somebody should put a bar here, you know. All these bike riders are stopped, and they're just chatting, and they're talking about trails, and they're, you know, and you'll be like, we have a dads and sons group that rides, and we just talk the whole time we're riding. And
that's it.
It's so different, unless we're doing the bottoms downhill, then everyone's focusing. But but yeah, I definitely noticed that.
Kitesurfing, like, they're so inclusive, and kitesurfing, there's also this element of danger. And so if you're just one kiter outside, you know, on the water kiting, there's an element of you know, losing the kite or maybe drowning, whatever. And so you would always see two kiters, because, you know, one is looking after the other one.
Yeah.
And so this feeling makes it so that, you know, I really thrive in that environment. And so I wasn't really prepared for, because I was also quite interested in learning how to surf, but then, you know, it's not been as appealing to me as kite surfing has. And I can imagine it's the same with mountain biking, as you say. So, yeah.
So as a kite surfer, you have to have like a buddy system, kind of like diving. Yep. So in business, it's the same kind of thing. If you have a buddy system, you can at least talk to someone in your community about, you know, what you're going through and how you're coping with things. And I guess an innovation hub does that as well, would you say?
Yeah.
The benefit of the innovation hub.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And if I was to go back to start a company again, like for the first time, I think that would be one of the things I would maybe pay most attention to is just to surround myself with like-minded people even quicker than I did, and then also have a couple of mentors maybe, and just asking people for help, because we struggled a lot in the beginning, just trying to figure stuff out, which wasted a lot of time and energy, and, you know, the ups and downs of starting a business.
Everyday stuff, the everyday administrative, the legals, all that sort of rubbish.
Yeah, just takes all your energy, and there's no reason why that should take energy, and so.
Correct. They're just procedures you got to get through and then forget about them.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the accountant in the family. don't get caught up on the numbers and all that stuff.
Yeah, even the estranged weird cousins in North Carolina. But
yeah.
But it's interesting. I wonder though, and I'm not sure, you didn't sort of give any timelines as how long you've been doing this for, but I think also that the support structures and the kind of the coolness of entrepreneurship and startups and has created, you know, incubators, it's created accelerators, it's created communities like what we're doing here, you know, with a community online as well as face to face. So I wonder if a lot of that's shifting as well. I definitely know there's still people who don't get access to it, but I'm wondering if that's actually shifted a lot in particularly the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, fortunately it has, and I think that's a great thing, because I think the more of these kind of communities you have, the better it is. And I've been traveling a lot to San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and what we took away from all those visits and having spent some considerable amount of time there is that, you know, that's a perfect ecosystem, especially for like a digital startup, because there's help there's help everywhere. Like they help you to get into it. They help, like the university starts with giving you like a proper sort of foundation for understanding the complexity of entrepreneurship. Then they actually also encourage you. And I think that's a big thing, especially I haven't really seen that in Northern Europe, is that the universities really, really want you to start a business. Like they really encourage you. And so they would have multiple programs, which basically leads to a foundation of a new venture, and they would have programs doing that. And then, so Stanford, for example, has, you know, multiple programs and ways for students to actually start businesses. In fact, a lot of the incredible sort of billion-dollar companies we've seen has started from one of these, Berkeley or Stanford or MIT. You know, I think MIT is by far is one of the biggest job creators in the world. And so it starts there, and then, you know, there's incubators, there's hubs to sit, there's communities, there's housing and stuff where entrepreneurs can sort of meet, and there's also venture capital. So I think that's also a big part of it. I think that's also, for me at least, it seems like that's one component that is lacking both in Australia and in Norway and the Nordic countries, also to some extent in Europe, less so in the US. But this VC community where it's not even VC, like angel investors through sort of these smaller syndicates to a proper sort of a VC company, and then, you know, the whole stack. And I think that stack is really important for entrepreneurs to actually have a chance of succeeding.
Yeah.
And that works really well in Silicon Valley. I think communities outside, I think, will have to be better at this. And so we need the same sort of, we don't need to replicate what's going on in Silicon Valley, but we need those.
But it's that connection. It's like you're saying, putting business people together. You bring, it's really bringing the people, the ideas, the training, and the money together.
That's it.
So
that's it.
I would challenge that's not just a Silicon Valley thing. That's a
no. Absolutely not. I think.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I think it's a good. I think it's a good case to look at and say, like, oh wow, this is interesting. They made it work, and it has all these elements. How do we make it work with the assumptions we have? I think you need to really, consider that. But I think it needs to come from, like, you know, to have like people in the top end of the league. You need to really foster like a great community of little leagues. Like you need to get people into these smaller sort of communities.
Start small and progress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly see that happening in the area we live in. These guys are
I was going to ask, like, how does this look like in
Asheville,
North Carolina, South Carolina?
I'm in North Carolina, or just. I'm right on the border. So Asheville, North Carolina is considered one of the emerging kind of tech and innovation hotspots in the US. It's, you know, the total catchment area is about 400,000 people, which includes the county I live in. It has, 2 or 3 really great incubators, accelerated kind of, and lots of programs going on, support at a lot of levels. You've got a bunch of smaller schools, so smaller colleges, and they're all getting right into it. So there, there's a lot of connection between, for example, the accelerators, the schools. So there's that connection going on as well. So Asheville, and the thing is that I find in a lot of these, we're getting investors now moving out of places like Silicon Valley and planning here, because there's a freshness to it, there's a vibrancy. There's something about the team, there's something about the football team that's hungry for a win, right?
Right.
Rather than the one that's being paid multi-billion-dollar salaries.
Yeah.
And is comfortable in their space. And not that Silicon Valley is like that. I mean, there is an extent of that, but it's definitely moving out of there, because there's a cost of living challenge, there's accessibility challenges. It's California, right? Which is not small business friendly. And so we're seeing a boom over here. I mean, North Carolina in particular, you got Charlotte, you've got Raleigh, they're all booming in the innovation space. Actually, weird cities like Winston-Salem and Boone, places like that, are all booming. People are coming here.
So what is booming in Norway at the moment? Like, just talking about the booming, like the bus,
the boom bust situation.
Yeah. So what's happening in Norway?
Always
is there
whatever's not working?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? What's just broken now in sort of the massive or the press is, which I find is actually quite interesting, is this shift in and the political sort of dialogue here is really about sustainability. So how do we reverse climate change? And carbon capture is a big part of that. So a big sort of opportunity that the Norwegian government is actually chasing now is carbon storage, which I think is interesting, because we've pumped a lot of oil up from the ground. Now we're thinking about how can we make money putting carbon down into the ground, which is, I mean, it's pretty genius if you ask me. So, and this is fairly complex, because putting CO2 down into the earth is actually quite complex. So you would need the same kind of competence and the same kind of technology that actually Norway has been sort of using or innovating in for the last 60 years. So you would need to drill quite far down, and then have ways of transporting the CO2 down into these reservoirs underneath the seabed. So they're now looking at business models into this, which I think is good, because we need to head in that direction, and we also need to sort of slowly decline or shut down the upstream industry, and then focus on the downstream.
Yep.
I think also what's interesting in this part of the world is, because we have access to really cheap sustainable energy from rain and hydropower and wind and stuff like that. I mean, it's the data center technology sort of sector is really ramping up, and so you see like big companies like Amazon, Facebook are looking to Nordic countries to set up data centers, like massive data centers. So I think that's interesting. Wow. I think from a startup scene, I think this is probably not the country international companies still are looking for. Things are moving in the right direction in Oslo. Stockholm is definitely like a super interesting hotspot because of Skype, because of Spotify. So that's now attracting lots of VC and angel investment money. I think Stockholm is now the 7th most busy entrepreneurial ecosystem in Europe, just behind like London, Paris, Berlin, and then Barcelona. I think is number 4. Yeah, and Lisbon, I think maybe. Sorry.
Lisbon, maybe.
Yeah. There's lots of stuff happening in Lisbon. Cost of living is really good there as well. I think Copenhagen for me, it seems like a better, like there should be more activity in Copenhagen, just from because it's such a hub. It's like the Dubai of the Nordic countries, and so I wish there were. I hope there's going to come more entrepreneurial activity there. Stockholm is somewhat far away for most people still. So, but yeah, it's interesting to see also that Stockholm became this, really like this hub, and it just goes to show that you need these cases where you have entrepreneurs who succeeded, right, and so are giving back, and so you actually see a lot of the investors in the Stockholm community are actually ex-Spotify people who came in early, made a ton of money in the IPO, and then and are now sort of reinvesting into the community. And there's lots of research on this from Harvard and Stanford that actually shows that you need those exit cases where someone really did well for our community to thrive and to attract more startups. You need a success case. So yeah, basically I think what we need to do here, and also like in Australia and other less known sort of natural startup cities, we need to attract or at least spawn a couple of really high-end success stories, and yeah.
Oh,
I think that's where it lies. That's what we need.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. We I know we started late, so we're finishing late as well. But we probably need to wrap things up there in terms of the live stream. But stay on the line, Marcus. Obviously, we'll keep chatting after this. But really appreciate having you on today. There's been some great insights. Fun to hear what's going up in the land of the cold. But
we actually had early on. We actually had a couple of Innovation Hub community managers join on Facebook, so I saw them come through and to say hello. I think all from UQ.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, so she's managing a hub there. So a few people came in and said g'day. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You have to wave out on the Facebook Live feed shortly to hit your Aussie mates again.
Well, awesome to have you, Mark, Linda. Good having you here again today for another week. Marcus, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. We'll get that Instagram Live one going as well, and we'll look forward to that. So we'll talk with you soon.